Did people really walk on water? Did seas truly part? Did ancient civilizations command technology we cannot even fully grasp today? For thousands of years, stories have come down to us. Tales of events that bend what we know about the world. And they talk about miracles, things that seem impossible. Things that science, even with all its advances, still scratches its head over. We live in a world that thrives on logic and proof. We like to understand how things work. And if something does not fit, we try to find an explanation. We look for natural causes. We study history. We dig up old bones and tools. We analyze ancient texts. But sometimes what we find just leads to more questions. Some events from way back when still feel like they defy explanation. They stand like stubborn puzzles refusing to be solved. Think about it. We have sent people to the moon. We can talk to someone on the other side of the planet instantly. We can map the human genome. But then we read an old story about a wall falling down from a trumpet blast, or a giant wooden boat saving all life from a flood, or a machine built 2 millennia ago that models the cosmos with precision we would expect from a Renaissance clockmaker. And we wonder, was it real? Was it magic? Was it something else? Something we just have not figured out yet. These are not just fairy tales. Many of these accounts are central to major religions. Others are archaeological enigmas. Scientists have spent centuries trying to offer natural explanations. They propose meteor showers, earthquakes, tidal waves, rare weather patterns. They suggest mass hysteria, optical illusions, or clever hoaxes, and sometimes their theories make a lot of sense. They show us how seemingly impossible things could have happened, but not always. Not for everything. There are still gaps. There are still details that do not quite fit the scientific narratives. These are the moments that truly make you think, moments where you confront the limits of our current understanding. So let us look at some of these old stories. Let us explore the wonders and the weirdness. Let us ask if science really has all the answers for these ancient, alleged miracles. Number 17, could a handheld device from ancient Greece predict the future of the cosmos? The Antikythera Mechanism is not a miracle in the way a sea parting is. It is a miracle of ingenuity, a miracle of forgotten knowledge. This device was found in a shipwreck off the Greek island of Antikythera in 1901. The divers pulled up what looked like a corroded lump of bronze and wood. It was just another artifact from an ancient Roman ship. But it was not. When scientists started to clean it and look closer, they found something extraordinary. Inside the lump were gears, lots of them, tiny, intricate gears. This was not just a fancy clock. This was a complex astronomical calculator. It could track the positions of the sun, moon, and planets. It could predict eclipses. It could even track the dates for the ancient Olympic Games. All of this from around 100 BCE. That is over 2,000 years ago. For context, mechanical clocks with similar gear complexity did not appear in Europe until the 14th century. That is more than 1,000 years later. Imagine finding a smartphone from ancient Rome. That is how out of place this technology feels. Dr. Derek DeSola Price, a science historian at Yale University, was one of the first to really study the mechanism in the 1950s and 60s. He published his groundbreaking work, Gears from the Greeks, in 1974. He described it as a clockwork computer. His research showed the incredible precision involved. The device used differential gearing, a technology thought to be invented in the 16th century. Later research, using X-ray tomography, revealed even more. In 2006, the Antikythera Mechanism Research Project, involving academics from Cardiff University and the National Archaeological Museum of Athens, published their findings in the journal Nature. They showed detailed images of the gears. They confirmed the device was far more sophisticated than first thought. It had 37 gear wheels. It represented a level of mechanical engineering not seen again for centuries. So, how did they build it? Who built it? Historians and scientists suggest it might have been built by Archimedes or someone from his school. Cicero, a Roman orator, wrote about a device built by Archimedes that could model the motions of celestial bodies. This fits the description. But even if it was Archimedes, how did this knowledge get lost? Why did it not lead to an industrial revolution in ancient times? Why was such advanced understanding of mechanics and astronomy seemingly forgotten for over 1,000 years? We still do not know how many of these devices existed. We have only found this one. And it was in a shipwreck. Was it a rare, unique item? Or were there many of them? We also do not know who taught the person who built it, or what other incredible machines they might have created that are now lost to history. It makes you wonder what other secrets the ancient world holds, hidden beneath the waves or buried in the earth. What other lost technologies exist that we have not yet discovered? How much more advanced were some ancient civilizations than we give them credit for? What knowledge was truly lost, and why did it vanish from human memory for so long? Number 16. Could an ancient clay pot really generate electricity? The Baghdad Battery is another example of ancient technology that makes you question what we know. This artifact, or collection of artifacts, was found near Baghdad, Iraq in 1936. It consists of a 13-centimeter tall clay jar. Inside the jar there is a copper cylinder, and inside the copper cylinder, an iron rod. The top is sealed with asphalt. The German archaeologist Wilhelm Koenig first described it in 1938. He proposed it was an ancient battery. The dating is usually put at around 250 BCE to 250 CE during the Parthian era. If Koenig was right, this would mean the Parthians understood how to generate electricity 2,000 years before Alessandro Volta invented the modern battery in 1800. How would it work? If the jar was filled with an electrolyte like vinegar or grape juice, the copper and iron would create an electrochemical reaction. This would generate a small voltage. Experiments have been done by scientists and hobbyists. In 1940, Willard F.M. Gray of the General Electric High Voltage Laboratory built a replica. He showed it could produce electricity. More recently, in 2003, for the TV show Mythbusters, replicas were made. They were filled with grape juice. They produced about 0.5 volts each. Connecting several of them together produced enough voltage to electroplate a small object. This is where the debate comes in. Was it really a battery, or was it something else? Some scholars suggest it was used for electroplating. They point to ancient objects found that appear to be electroplated with gold or silver. Others suggest it might have been used for medicinal purposes, perhaps to numb pain with a mild electric shock. Or maybe it was just a container for scrolls, or a vessel for ritual purposes. The main argument against it being a battery is that no wires or other electrical apparatus have been found with it. Also, there are no ancient texts describing electricity or its use. If they had this technology, why is there no clear evidence of its widespread use or understanding? However, the design is strikingly similar to modern galvanic cells. The presence of both a copper and an iron component, separated by an insulating material, points strongly to electrical generation. Dr. Arne Egebrecht, a German Egyptologist, created a working model in 1978. He demonstrated that a series of such batteries could indeed electroplate small silver statues with gold. He even recreated an ancient technique of using acid to remove the gold from the surface of an object, leaving behind a faint imprint of the original gold plating. So, while we have plausible explanations for how it could work, the why and how common are still a mystery. It forces us to reconsider the technological capabilities of ancient civilizations. Maybe they had more knowledge than we thought. Maybe we are missing a big piece of the puzzle. What other energy sources or devices might have been known in ancient times? Could ancient people have understood electricity without leaving clear written records of it? How much technological innovation might have been lost to us, only to be rediscovered centuries later? Number 15. Did a divine star guide wise men to a newborn king? The Star of Bethlehem is a central part of the Christmas story. The Gospel of Matthew says a bright star appeared in the sky. This star guided the Magi, or wise men, from the east to the birthplace of Jesus in Bethlehem. It is often seen as a supernatural sign, a miraculous event, but astronomers and historians have tried to explain it scientifically. What could the Star of Bethlehem have been? Many theories exist. One idea is a planetary conjunction. This is when two or more planets appear very close together in the sky. From Earth, they look like a single bright object. Johannes Kepler, the famous astronomer, proposed in 1614 that a triple conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn occurred in 7 BCE. This would have been a rare and striking sight. He also calculated that a supernova occurred in 5 BCE. Later research has built on these ideas. Professor Michael Molnar, a Rutgers University astronomer, argued in his 1999 book, The Star of Bethlehem, The Legacy of the Magi, for a different astrological interpretation. He suggests a double lunar occultation of Jupiter in the constellation Aries in 6 BCE. This was visible only in the east. He argues that this specific alignment, combined with other astrological signs, would have been interpreted by the Magi as extremely significant. It would have signaled the birth of a king in Judea. Another theory is a comet. Comets can be very bright and visible for long periods. They were often seen as omens in ancient times. However, comets were usually seen as bad omens, bringing disaster. This does not quite fit the joyful context of the Star of Bethlehem. Some scholars have pointed to Halley's Comet, which was visible in 12 BCE, but this is too early for most estimates of Jesus' birth, which are usually placed between 6 and 4 BCE. A Chinese record from 5 BCE mentions a nova, or comet, that remained visible for 70 days. This aligns better with the timeline, so science offers several plausible natural phenomena. A supernova, a comet, or a planetary conjunction. Any of these could have been interpreted as a guiding star. But the story also says the star stood over where the young child was. This specific directional guidance, leading the Magi to a particular house, is harder to explain naturally. Stars do not just stop and hover over one spot. Could have been a combination of events. A rare astronomical display that was then interpreted through a religious lens. Or was there something truly unique and beyond our current understanding happening in the sky at that time? The Star of Bethlehem remains a powerful symbol. It challenges us to bridge the gap between faith and scientific observation. Could ancient peoples have interpreted natural phenomena with a deeper symbolic meaning that we now miss? Is there a limit to how much we can explain ancient religious texts using modern scientific models? What if some celestial events are not just random, but are signals in a grander cosmic design? Number 14. How did a pillar of cloud and fire guide a nation through the wilderness? The story of the Exodus describes God leading the Israelites out of Egypt. They wandered in the desert for 40 years. During this time, they were guided by a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. This was not just a symbolic guide. It was a tangible presence. The book of Exodus states it went before them, showing them the way. It also stood behind them, separating them from the pursuing Egyptian army at the Red Sea. This phenomenon provided both navigation and protection. It was a constant reminder of divine presence. For thousands of people moving through a harsh desert, such a guide would have been essential for survival. How could a pillar of cloud and fire exist and move like that? Scientific explanations often look to natural atmospheric phenomena. Volcanic activity is one suggestion. A distant volcanic eruption could produce a massive ash cloud during the day. This cloud could reflect sunlight, appearing as a bright, towering pillar. At night, the glowing lava or gases from the eruption could create a pillar of fire effect. There are active volcanic regions in the Middle East, though not always close to the traditional Exodus routes. However, a volcanic eruption would likely bring ashfall, seismic activity, and other destructive elements, which are not mentioned in the biblical text. Another idea is meteorological. A unique dust storm or sand pillar, illuminated by the sun, could appear as a cloud by day. At night, if there were large fires set by the Israelites for warmth and cooking, the smoke could rise in a column and be lit by the fire below, creating a pillar of fire effect. Some scholars have suggested a large number of torches carried by the leading group could create such an illusion at night. But a column of smoke and fire moving ahead of an entire nation with specific directional guidance seems unlikely to be purely accidental. Another more down-to-earth explanation is a simple signaling system. A large flag or banner, possibly with reflective material, could have been carried at the head of the procession during the day. At night, a large brazier fire basket could have been carried, creating a visible pillar of smoke and fire. This would be a practical way for such a massive group to stay together and follow a leader. However, the biblical text suggests a supernatural origin. It describes the pillar as a manifestation of God's presence, not just a human-made signal. The narrative describes the pillar as a dynamic, intelligent guide. It adjusted its position to protect the people. It did not simply drift with the wind. This intelligent movement is hard to reconcile with a purely natural phenomenon like a dust cloud or volcanic plume. The consistency of this guidance for 40 years also pushes against random weather events. So, was it a natural event interpreted as divine, or was it truly a miraculous intervention, a constant sign that defies our understanding of physics and meteorology? The pillar of cloud and fire remains one of the most intriguing and mysterious aspects of the Exodus story. Could ancient peoples have possessed a more profound understanding of meteorology or geology that allowed them to predict or even manipulate such phenomena. How can we reconcile spiritual narratives with purely scientific explanations without dismissing one or the other? What if there are natural forces at play that we have not yet fully identified or understood? Number 13, how did a single man command 10 plagues against an empire? The plagues of Egypt, as told in the book of Exodus, are a dramatic series of 10 catastrophic events. These were supposedly inflicted upon Egypt by God through Moses and Aaron to convince Pharaoh to release the Israelite slaves. These plagues include turning the Nile to blood, swarms of frogs, gnats, flies, disease on livestock, boils, hail, locusts, darkness, and finally, the death of the firstborn. Each plague was severe, each progressively worsened, and each was supposedly resisted by Pharaoh, leading to the next. For centuries, scholars have tried to find natural explanations for these events. The idea is that a chain reaction of natural disasters could be interpreted as divine judgment. One popular theory, championed by researchers like Dr. Graham Davies of Cambridge University, links the plagues to an environmental cascade. The first plague, the Nile turning to blood, could be a red algae bloom, or it could be a massive flood carrying red-colored sediment. This would make the water undrinkable. It would kill fish. This then sets off a chain. The dead fish and bad water would drive frogs out of the Nile. This would explain the second plague. The dead frogs would then create a breeding ground for insects. This could lead to swarms of gnats and flies plagues 3 and 4. These insects could then carry diseases. This might explain the pestilence on livestock plague 5 and boils on humans plague 6. A volcanic eruption, possibly from the island of Thera Santorini, around 1600 to 1500 BCE, has been proposed to explain later plagues. Volcanic ash in the atmosphere could lead to unusual hailstorms plague 7. It could also block out the sun, causing the plague of darkness plague 9. The ash could also affect vegetation, leading to locust infestations plague 8 due to disruption of ecosystems. This cascade theory, while clever, has some problems. The timing of the Thera eruption does not perfectly align with most biblical timelines for the Exodus. Also, while volcanic ash can cause dramatic weather, the specific progression of the plagues in the Bible, each one announced and then happening, suggests a controlled, directed event, not a random natural disaster. And the 10th plague, the death of the firstborn, is the hardest to explain naturally. It is very specific. It targets only certain individuals in each household. This is not something a natural environmental disaster usually does. Some scholars have suggested a disease outbreak for the 10th plague. But how would it selectively target the firstborn? The specificity and the timing of each plague, stopping when Moses asked, "Make it hard to see them as purely natural occurrences." The Bible emphasizes that these were not just natural disasters, but acts of God designed to demonstrate his power. So, were the plagues a series of unfortunate natural events that were interpreted as divine acts? Or were they truly supernatural interventions carefully orchestrated to break Pharaoh's will? The sheer scale and precision of the plagues continue to challenge scientific interpretation. Could ancient peoples have observed environmental patterns that we no longer recognize as indicators of coming disasters? Is it possible that some natural events are so rare and perfectly timed that they appear miraculous? What do these stories tell us about human nature and our need to find meaning in chaos? Number 12. Did a great flood wipe out all humanity, and was a giant boat the only hope? The story of Noah's Ark and the Great Flood is found in the book of Genesis. It describes God deciding to destroy humanity because of its wickedness. Only Noah, his family, and pairs of every animal are spared. They build a massive ark, ride out a global flood, and then repopulate the earth. This tale is not unique to the Bible. Flood myths exist in cultures all over the world. The Sumerian Epic of Gilgamesh, predating the Bible, features a similar flood story with a hero named Utnapishtim. The idea of a global flood covering the highest mountains is difficult for science to accept. There is simply not enough water on Earth to do that, and geological evidence does not support a single worldwide flood event in recorded human history. However, some scientists have proposed regional flood events that were so massive they would have felt global to ancient people. One prominent theory is the Black Sea Deluge hypothesis. This was proposed by oceanographers William Ryan and Walter Pittman of Columbia University in 1997. They suggest that around 5,600 BCE, the Black Sea was a freshwater lake, much smaller than it is today. It was cut off from the Mediterranean Sea by a land bridge. As the last ice age ended, sea levels rose. The Mediterranean eventually broke through the Bosphorus Strait. A massive torrent of salt water poured into the Black Sea basin. This would have caused the sea level to rise dramatically, perhaps hundreds of feet in a short time. It would have displaced people living along its shores. This sudden, catastrophic flooding could have been the origin of many flood myths in the region. However, the Black Sea deluge would have been regional. It would not have covered mountaintops or wiped out all life on Earth as described in Genesis. Other theories suggest large tsunamis, perhaps caused by comet impacts or massive river floods. For example, the flooding of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, which was common in Mesopotamia, could have inspired local flood narratives. The challenge for science is not just explaining a large flood, but explaining one that fits all the biblical details of a pre-announced, divinely orchestrated event, the specific capacity of the ark, and the survival of all animal species from a single vessel. The logistics of housing and feeding millions of species of animals, or even just thousands on one boat for over a year, are immense. Many biologists argue it is practically impossible. Ken Ham and Answers in Genesis have built a life-sized replica of Noah's Ark in Kentucky, claiming to show its feasibility. But their model relies on a much smaller interpretation of kinds of animals than typically understood by science. So, while science can offer explanations for massive regional floods, the global, species-preserving scale of Noah's Ark remains a major point of contention. It forces us to consider if the story is purely allegorical, or if it speaks to an event that transcends our current scientific understanding. How could ancient peoples have independently developed similar flood narratives across continents? What profound human experience does the flood myth represent that resonates so universally? Could there be a forgotten geological event that was far more widespread than we currently understand? Number 11. Could an ancient prophetic oracle truly see the future? The Oracle of Delphi was one of the most important religious sites in the ancient Greek world. People from all over, from common citizens to kings, traveled to consult the Pythia, the priestess of Apollo. She would deliver prophecies. These prophecies influenced major political decisions, wars, and personal lives for over 1,000 years, from the 8th century BCE to the 4th century CE. The Pythia sat on a tripod over a chasm, inhaling vapors, and then spoke in an ecstatic trance. Her words were then interpreted by male priests. The predictions were often vague and open to interpretation. This made them hard to disprove. For example, King Croesus of Lydia asked if he should attack the Persian Empire. The oracle famously replied that if he attacked, a great empire would be destroyed. Croesus took this to mean the Persian Empire. He attacked. But it was his own Lydian empire that was destroyed. This kind of ambiguity allowed the oracle to maintain its reputation. But what caused the Pythia's trance? For centuries, people thought it was just religious fervor or perhaps hallucinogenic herbs. In the 20th century, scientists began to investigate. In 1996, a team led by geologist J.Z. Du Bois and archaeologist John Hale from the Geological Society of America proposed a groundbreaking theory. They found geological evidence of two active fault lines intersecting beneath the Temple of Apollo at Delphi. One of these faults contained bituminous limestone, which can produce hydrocarbon gases when heated by seismic activity. Their research suggested that the chasm beneath the temple was not just a symbolic crack. It was a real fissure. This fissure released gases like ethylene, methane, and ethane. Ethylene, in particular, is a sweet-smelling gas known to induce trances, euphoria, and out-of-body experiences, even at low doses. Modern medical studies have shown that inhaling specific gas mixtures can indeed alter consciousness and perception. This theory was further supported by studies published in journals like Geology. It provided a scientific explanation for the Pythia's behavior. The gases would have created a potent, mind-altering atmosphere. This would explain the oracular trances without resorting to the supernatural. However, some scholars remain skeptical. Other geological studies have found no evidence of significant gas emissions at Delphi today. And while ethylene can induce trances, the specific mix and concentration needed and its continuous release over centuries are still debated. Also, even if the trance was induced by gas, the content of the prophecies, sometimes remarkably accurate or insightful, is still a mystery. Was it just random ravings shaped by the priests? Or did the altered state allow for some form of intuitive foresight? The Oracle of Delphi stands as a fascinating case study. It shows how ancient mysteries can be peeled back by scientific inquiry. But it also highlights the limits of that inquiry. Even with a plausible explanation for the trance, the true nature of the prophecies, were they lucky guesses, clever manipulation, or something more remains elusive? Could specific geological formations produce natural hallucinogens that ancient peoples used for spiritual or ritualistic purposes elsewhere? To what extent did ancient spiritual leaders understand and perhaps even manipulate natural phenomena to maintain their authority? Is it possible that altered states of consciousness can sometimes open pathways to knowledge not accessible in everyday awareness? Number 10. Did Jesus truly walk on water, or was it an optical illusion? The Gospel accounts of Jesus walking on water are among the most famous and striking miracles. Matthew, Mark, and John all describe Jesus walking on the Sea of Galilee during a storm. His disciples are in a boat, struggling against the waves. They see him and are terrified, thinking he is a ghost. He tells them not to be afraid. Peter even tries to walk on the water too, but starts to sink when his faith falters. This event defies the laws of physics. Humans cannot walk on water. It is a clear assertion of supernatural power. So, naturally, scientific and skeptical explanations have been offered. One common theory suggests an optical illusion. The disciples were in the midst of a storm, likely low visibility. It was night. Perhaps Jesus was walking on a sandbar or a hidden rock formation that was close to the surface. From a distance, especially in the dark and choppy water, it could have looked like he was walking on the water itself. Dr. Dorothy L.S. Sayers, a theologian, suggested this in her book, The Man Born to be King. She thought Jesus might have been walking on a jetty or a fishing net. Another possibility is a mirage effect. Under certain atmospheric conditions, especially over water, light can be bent. This can make distant objects appear to be in a different place, or even appear to float above the surface. If Jesus was walking on the shore or a very shallow part of the lake, a mirage could have made him appear to be on the water from the disciples' perspective. But for him to approach the boat and for Peter to attempt to join him makes this less likely as a full explanation. A more recent scientific hypothesis comes from Professor Doron Nof, an oceanography professor at Florida State University. In 2006, he and his team published research in the Journal of Paleontology. They proposed that a rare patch of ice might have formed on the Sea of Galilee. This would happen during an extremely cold period, like the Little Ice Age, though the timing does not perfectly align with the 1st century CE. Knopf's calculations suggest that if there were specific conditions, a thin layer of ice could have formed in certain shallow protected bays of the lake. This ice would be strong enough for a person to walk on. It might not be immediately obvious from a distance. However, the Sea of Galilee is a freshwater lake, but it is not known to freeze over. The climate of Galilee is generally mild. For ice strong enough to hold a person to form and survive a storm is highly improbable. Also, the biblical account describes a storm with great waves. Ice would likely break up in such conditions. The narrative's emphasis on Jesus calming the storm and his divine power also works against purely natural explanations. The story is presented as a demonstration of his authority over nature. If it was just an optical illusion or a sandbar, the spiritual impact would be entirely lost. The disciples' fear and subsequent awe suggest they witnessed something truly extraordinary and unsettling. So, was it a misinterpretation of a natural phenomenon, or a physical impossibility brought about by divine will? The scientific explanations offer intriguing possibilities, but they often require specific, unusual conditions and stretch credulity in their own way, leaving the core mystery intact. What are the psychological effects of extreme stress and fear on perception during an intense storm? Could ancient texts use metaphorical language that we now interpret too literally? How much does our understanding of the world limit our ability to comprehend events from a distant past? Number 9. Did the walls of Jericho really fall from a trumpet blast? The story of the Battle of Jericho from the book of Joshua is one of the most dramatic in the Old Testament. The Israelites, led by Joshua, arrive at the fortified city of Jericho. Instead of a direct assault, they are commanded by God to march around the city once a day for 6 days, with priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant and blowing trumpets. On the 7th day they march 7 times. Then, at Joshua's command, they all shout, and the walls of Jericho collapse. This allows the Israelites to storm the city and conquer it. This is a clear miracle. The walls do not just fall down from shouts and trumpets, it defies engineering and physics. Archaeologists have excavated Jericho for over a century. They have found evidence of ancient city walls and their collapse. One of the most famous archaeologists to work at Jericho was Kathleen Kenyon in the 1950s. She found evidence of a major destruction layer. This layer included a collapsed mud brick wall. She dated this destruction to around 1550 BCE. This date is much earlier than the traditional biblical timeline for Joshua, which is often placed around 1400 to 1200 BCE, the Late Bronze Age. Her findings suggested that there was no city of Jericho with massive walls for Joshua to conquer at the traditional time. This created a big problem for the biblical narrative. However, later reevaluations of Kenyon's work and new evidence have complicated this. Bryant G. Wood, an archaeologist, re-examined Kenyon's pottery and carbon-14 dating. He published his findings in the Bulletin of the American Schools of Oriental Research in 1990. Wood argued that the destruction layer Kenyon found actually dated to the Late Bronze Age, around 1400 BCE. This date would align perfectly with the biblical account. He also found evidence that the walls fell outward, as if pushed by an earthquake. And he noted that the city was burned, just as the Bible describes, so an earthquake is the most common scientific explanation. Jericho is located in the Jordan Rift Valley, a very seismically active area. Earthquakes are common there. A strong earthquake could certainly cause city walls to collapse. The simultaneous shouting and trumpet blasts might have been a way to capitalize on an opportune moment. Or perhaps the seismic activity itself triggered the collapse at that very moment, leading the Israelites to believe their actions caused it. However, the biblical account specifically says the wall fell down flat. This suggests a complete and uniform collapse. An earthquake usually causes partial damage or uneven collapse. Also, the synchronicity of the shout, the trumpets, and the immediate complete collapse still seems too perfect for mere coincidence. Was it an earthquake precisely timed by divine intervention, or was it just a story passed down and embellished over time? The archaeological evidence for the destruction of Jericho is strong. The exact cause and timing and its relation to the biblical narrative remain hotly debated. It forces us to ask how much of history is factual, how much is legendary, and how much falls in between. Could vibrations from sound really weaken ancient structures in specific conditions? How do ancient peoples distinguish between natural disasters and divine intervention? What if some historical events are so complex that they resist simple explanations, whether scientific or spiritual? Number 8, did a holy man raise a dead man from his tomb after 4 days? The resurrection of Lazarus is one of Jesus' most astonishing miracles told in the Gospel of John. Lazarus, a friend of Jesus, falls ill and dies. He is buried in a tomb. 4 days later, Jesus arrives. Despite Martha's protest that by this time there is a bad odor, Jesus orders the stone to be rolled away. He calls out, "Lazarus, come out." And Lazarus emerges from the tomb, still wrapped in burial cloths. This is a clear-cut case of bringing a dead person back to life. From a scientific perspective, once a person is clinically dead, no heartbeat, no brain activity, the body begins to decompose. Reversing this process, especially, after 4 days, is impossible with current medical knowledge. Skeptical explanations often propose that Lazarus was not truly dead. He might have been in a coma, a deep sleep, or a cataleptic state. Cataplexy is a condition where a person can appear lifeless with slowed breathing and heartbeat, sometimes for extended periods. In ancient times, without modern diagnostic tools, distinguishing between death and such a severe state would have been difficult. If Lazarus was merely in a deep coma, Jesus' call could have awakened him. This theory implies that Jesus was either very lucky or that he had a profound understanding of medical conditions that ancient people did not. However, the gospel account is very specific. It says Lazarus had been dead for 4 days. And Martha explicitly mentions the body would smell, indicating decomposition had begun. If it was just a coma, that detail would seem out of place. Another possibility is that the story is symbolic. Many scholars see the resurrection of Lazarus as a metaphor for spiritual awakening. It represents Jesus' power over death and his ability to bring spiritual life. In this view, the literal physical resurrection might not be the main point. But religious texts often intend for their miracles to be taken literally by their audience. The story's impact on those who witnessed it, leading many to believe in Jesus, suggests they saw something truly extraordinary. It was not just a person waking up from a nap. The detail of Lazarus being bound in burial cloths and having to be unbound also adds to the literal interpretation. There is no scientific way to explain this event as described. It falls squarely into the realm of the supernatural. For those who believe, it is proof of divine power. For those who seek scientific explanations, it remains an insoluble puzzle or a story that cannot be literally true. The conflict highlights the fundamental difference in how faith and science approach claims of the impossible. What are the limits of ancient medical knowledge, and how might that have influenced the reporting of severe illness or apparent death? How does the cultural context of a story influence how we interpret miraculous events? Is there a possibility that some biological processes are not yet fully understood, allowing for extraordinary recovery under certain conditions? Number 7. How were the ancient pyramids of Giza built with such incredible precision? The Great Pyramids of Giza are among the most iconic and enduring structures on Earth. Built around 2580 to 2560 BCE for Pharaoh Khufu, the largest of them, the Great Pyramid, stood as the tallest man-made structure for over 3,800 years. Its construction is mind-boggling. It consists of an estimated 2.3 million stone blocks. Each block weighs an average of 2.5 tons. Some weigh up to 80 tons. They were quarried, transported, and then lifted into place with astonishing precision. The sheer scale of the project, combined with the apparent lack of advanced technology, has led many to call its construction miraculous. How did they do it? Mainstream archaeology offers several theories. The most widely accepted involves a massive workforce of skilled laborers, not slaves as often portrayed. They used ramps, levers, and sheer human muscle. Dr. Zahi Hawass, a prominent Egyptian archaeologist, has long championed this view. He emphasizes the organizational genius required to coordinate such a massive undertaking. The blocks were quarried nearby, mostly limestone, or from distant quarries, granite for chambers, transported up the Nile. Then, they would have been pulled on sledges over lubricated surfaces. For lifting, the most common theory is the use of ramps. There are various ramp theories: a single straight ramp, a spiral ramp winding around the pyramid, or an internal ramp. In 2018, a Franco-British team from the French Institute for Oriental Archaeology and the University of Liverpool found evidence of a 4,500-year-old ramp system at the Alabaster Quarry of Hatnub. This ramp system had stairways and holes, which would have allowed workers to pull huge stone blocks up very steep slopes using ropes and a pulley-like mechanism. This discovery gives strong support to the idea of ramps. But even with ramps, the precision is stunning. The Great Pyramid's base is almost perfectly square, with sides averaging 230 meters and only a few centimeters of difference between them. The corners are nearly perfect right angles. The orientation to true north is incredibly accurate. It is less than 1/10 of a degree off. This level of astronomical and engineering sophistication is hard to reconcile with the tools available: copper chisels, stone hammers, and ropes. Some theories venture into the more speculative. Christopher Dunn, an engineer, suggests the ancient Egyptians must have used advanced machining technology. In his 1998 book, The Giza Power Plant, he argues for evidence of precise saw marks and boreholes that he claims could only be made by high-speed tools. His theories are largely dismissed by mainstream Egyptologists who say such evidence can be explained by simpler, albeit labor-intensive, methods. The incredible alignment to cardinal directions suggests advanced astronomical knowledge. The geometry points to sophisticated mathematical understanding. For a civilization using basic tools, this level of precision seems almost impossible. It prompts questions about lost knowledge or capabilities that we underestimate. So, was it brute force and organizational genius, or did the ancient Egyptians possess knowledge and techniques that have since been forgotten? The pyramids stand as a testament to human endeavor, but they also remain a stubborn mystery for how exactly they achieved such a monumental feat. Could ancient engineers have understood principles of physics and mechanics that were later lost and then rediscovered? How much can human willpower and sheer numbers overcome technological limitations? What other astonishing feats of engineering might ancient civilizations have accomplished that we have not yet found or fully understood? Number 6. Could an ancient healing god bring people back from the brink of death? Asclepius was the Greek god of medicine and healing. His cult was widespread throughout the ancient world. People would travel to his sanctuaries, known as Asclepia, to seek healing. These places were essentially ancient healing centers, combining religious ritual with practical medicine. People would sleep in a special building called an abaton. During their sleep, Asclepius or one of his sacred snakes would appear to them in a dream, offering a cure. Upon waking, they would report their dreams to priests, who would then interpret them and prescribe treatments. The miracles that these temples were documented in inscriptions called yamata. These inscriptions detail various healings, blind people seeing, lame people walking, even people being brought back from the brink of death. For example, at Epidaurus, one famous inscription tells of a man who suffered from an ulcer who was cured after a dream. Another describes a barren woman who conceived a child. These accounts are numerous and attest to the widespread belief in Asclepius's healing power. From a scientific perspective, these healings can be explained in several ways. The power of suggestion and the placebo effect are strong candidates. When people believe they will be healed by a god in a sacred place, their own bodies can sometimes respond. This psychological effect can be profound. Modern medicine recognizes the placebo effect as a real phenomenon. The Asclepia were also not just places of ritual. They were often located in pleasant, natural surroundings. They had clean water, good food, and offered a sense of calm and rest. These elements themselves would have been beneficial for sick people. The priests also likely offered practical medical advice and remedies learned through generations of observation. They might have used herbal medicines or rudimentary surgical procedures. The incubation ritual, sleeping in the abaton, was designed to induce vivid dreams. Fasting, sensory deprivation, and the intense religious atmosphere could all contribute to an altered state of consciousness. In this state, people might see Asclepius or experience a healing vision. The relief from symptoms could then be attributed to the god. However, some accounts go beyond what a simple placebo effect might explain. Stories of tumors shrinking overnight or serious chronic conditions vanishing seem to defy easy explanation. Could some of these miracles have been misdiagnoses, or perhaps cases of spontaneous remission, where disease inexplicably improves on its own? These phenomena do occur, though rarely. The core of the mystery lies in the specific and often dramatic nature of some of the reported cures. If a person was truly paralyzed and then walked away, that is a profound shift. The collective belief in Asclepius's power over centuries, drawing people from all social classes, suggests something more than just simple fraud. The healing sanctuaries persisted and thrived. So, were these simply early forms of holistic medicine, enhanced by the power of belief? Or did some true, inexplicable healings occur that point to a force beyond current scientific understanding? The legacy of Asclepius shows the ancient intertwining of medicine, faith, and the enduring human search for healing. What role does belief play in the healing process, and how can we measure its impact scientifically? How much of ancient miracle cures could be attributed to natural remedies or unknown physiological processes? Are there dimensions of human healing that science has not yet fully explored or understood? Number 5. Could an ancient tablet tell the story of a lost city buried under the sea? Plato's account of Atlantis, found in his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, is one of the most famous lost civilization myths. He describes an advanced island civilization, powerful and virtuous, which eventually became corrupt. Their hubris led to their destruction by the gods. The island sank into the sea in a single day and night of misfortune. Plato placed this event 9,000 years before his time, around 9,600 BCE. He said it was located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, the Strait of Gibraltar. Plato presented this story as a historical account passed down through generations. He claimed it came from Egyptian priests. However, most classical scholars consider Atlantis to be a cautionary tale, a philosophical allegory. It was a device for Plato to illustrate his ideas about ideal societies and the dangers of corruption. Despite this, many people believe Atlantis was real. They have searched for it for centuries. Countless books and theories propose locations for Atlantis. Some suggest the Mediterranean, like the island of Santorini, ancient Thera, which was destroyed by a massive volcanic eruption around 1600 BCE. This cataclysm caused tsunamis and ash clouds, wiping out the Minoan civilization on Crete and Thera itself. This event is a real-world example of an advanced civilization suddenly destroyed by natural disaster. Other proposed locations include the Caribbean, the Azores, or even off the coast of Africa. Ignatius Donnelly, an American congressman, published Atlantis, the Antediluvian World, in 1882. This book popularized the idea of a real Atlantis. He argued that it was the source of all ancient civilizations and their technologies. This fueled widespread public fascination. Science struggles with Atlantis because there is no archaeological or geological evidence to support its existence as described by Plato. No sunken continent the size of Atlantis has ever been found. Oceanographic surveys have mapped much of the ocean floor. They have found no evidence of such a massive, advanced sunken city. The deep ocean trenches and continental shelves are not places where a large island continent would simply disappear without a trace. The geological processes that shape Earth's crust plate tectonics mean that a continent-sized island sinking rapidly is virtually impossible. Small islands can sink or be submerged due to volcanic activity, sea level changes, or subsidence, but not an entire continent. So, while the idea of a lost, technologically advanced civilization is captivating, Plato's Atlantis is almost universally dismissed by mainstream scientists and historians as fact. They see it as a brilliant piece of fiction with a moral lesson. The miracle here is not an event, but the endurance of the myth itself. It is a story so compelling that people still search for it. Why does the idea of a lost, advanced civilization resonate so strongly with humanity? Could ancient stories, even allegorical ones, contain kernels of truth about lost cultures or dramatic geological events? What if there are technologies or civilizations in ancient history that we have simply not discovered yet due to their remote locations or the nature of their destruction? Number 4. Did a divine hand provide daily bread for 40 years in the desert? Manna from heaven is another powerful miracle from the book of Exodus. After the Israelites escaped Egypt, they complained about lack of food in the wilderness. God promised to send them food from heaven, and indeed, every morning, a fine flake-like substance appeared on the ground. The Israelites called it manna, meaning, what is it? They were told to gather enough for each day, except on the 6th day, when they could gather a double portion for the Sabbath. If they tried to save it longer, it would spoil and breed worms, except for the Sabbath portion. The description in Exodus is specific. It was fine flake-like, like hoarfrost on the ground. It tasted like wafers made with honey. It could be ground, pounded, baked, or boiled. This substance sustained millions of people for 40 years in the desert. Scientific explanations look for natural sources for manna. One popular theory involves a type of honeydew secreted by scale insects. These insects, such as Trabutina monopara, infest tamarisk trees in the Sinai Peninsula. During certain seasons, they excrete a sweet, sticky liquid. This liquid drips onto the ground or leaves. It dries into small, edible, white flakes. This substance is known locally as man or manna. It is collected and eaten by Bedouins today. It is sweet and nutritious. This tamarisk manna fits some biblical descriptions. It is white, flake-like, sweet, and appears in the morning. It can be collected. However, there are some significant discrepancies. Tamarisk manna is seasonal and limited in quantity. It would not be enough to feed millions of people for 40 years. It also only forms in specific locations, not spread across the entire wilderness. And it spoils quickly, similar to the biblical account, but it does not breed worms if kept. Another theory suggests certain edible lichens, like Lecanora esculenta. These lichens grow in arid regions. They can be blown by strong winds into large quantities. They are edible and nutritious. Some researchers have suggested that large quantities of these lichens could have been mistaken for a divine gift. However, these lichens do not typically appear daily, nor do they spoil in the specific way described. The miraculous aspect in the Bible is the reliability and the timing. It appeared every day, except for the Sabbath. It did not appear on the Sabbath. It also could not be stored for more than a day, except for the Sabbath. This precise, almost programmatic nature of its appearance and disappearance, coupled with its ability to sustain a massive population, makes a purely natural explanation difficult. If it was just tamarisk manna, why did it stop appearing after 40 years when they entered the Promised Land? So, was manna a naturally occurring substance that was divinely provided and managed? Or was it an outright miraculous substance with no natural equivalent? The scientific explanations offer interesting parallels, but they do not fully account for the narrative's details. The story of manna highlights the tension between seeking natural explanations for divine provision and accepting the inexplicable as an act of faith. Could there be other edible desert substances or symbiotic relationships that we do not fully understand? How much does our modern understanding of food sources limit our ability to comprehend ancient survival strategies? What if the rules of nature were different or perceived differently in ancient times? Question number 3, could a divine healer really restore sight, make the lame walk, and cure all diseases? The healing miracles of Jesus are central to the Gospels. They are numerous and diverse. He restored sight to the blind, made the lame walk, healed lepers, cured fevers, and even cast out demons. The Gospel of John details the healing at the pool of Bethesda, where a paralyzed man, sick for 38 years, is told by Jesus to get up, pick up your mat, and walk. And he does. These events are presented as direct demonstrations of divine power, often instantaneous and complete. From a scientific and medical perspective, such immediate and total healings of chronic or congenital conditions are impossible. Modern medicine can treat many diseases. It can restore some function, but it cannot, for example, regenerate a retina instantly to cure blindness caused by damage. It cannot reverse decades of paralysis with a word. Skeptical explanations often propose several possibilities. One is misdiagnosis. In ancient times, without modern diagnostic tools, many conditions would have been poorly understood. Some forms of blindness might have been psychosomatic, some paralysis could have been hysterical or temporary. If a person suffered from a condition that was not as severe as it appeared, or was psychological in origin, a powerful suggestion or belief in a divine healer could trigger a spontaneous recovery. The placebo effect, as discussed with Asclepius, is a powerful force. Another explanation is that the stories were exaggerated or symbolic. The Gospels were written years after Jesus' death. Stories might have been embellished through oral tradition. The healings could symbolize spiritual healing or awakening rather than literal physical cures. For example, blindness could refer to spiritual blindness. However, the accounts often provide specific details. They talk about people who were born blind or had been lame from birth. These conditions are much harder to explain as psychosomatic. The reactions of the crowds and the Jewish authorities also suggest that they witnessed something truly out of the ordinary, not just a person recovering from a mild illness. The healings were often public and dramatic. Consider the case of the blind man at the pool of Siloam, John 9. Jesus spits on the ground, makes mud, puts it on the man's eyes, and tells him to wash in the pool. The man washes and returns seeing. This specific sensory-rich process, ending in immediate sight, is hard to dismiss as pure suggestion. While some conditions might have been amenable to the placebo effect or were misdiagnosed, the sheer range and severity of the reported healings, coupled with their instantaneous nature, present a significant challenge to scientific explanation. For believers, these are genuine miracles attesting to Jesus' divinity. For skeptics, they remain anecdotes that cannot be verified or explained within the current framework of science. How much impact does the power of suggestion and belief truly have on the human body's ability to heal itself? Could some ancient ailments have been symptoms of conditions that are now rare or misunderstood? Is there a subtle energy or force that can influence biological systems in ways that modern medicine has not yet measured or comprehended? Number 2, how did a single man part a sea to escape an army? The parting of the Red Sea is arguably the most famous miracle in the Bible. It is recounted in the book of Exodus. The Israelites fleeing Egypt find themselves trapped between the Red Sea and the pursuing Egyptian army. Moses raises his staff, and God causes a strong east wind to blow all night, dividing the waters. The Israelites walk across on dry ground. When the Egyptians follow, the waters return, drowning the entire army. This is a monumental event. It involves the manipulation of an entire body of water. Scientists have tried for centuries to find a natural explanation for this. The most common scientific theories involve strong winds, tsunamis, or misidentification of the body of water. One prominent theory, explored by researchers at the National Center for Atmospheric Research and the University of Colorado, Boulder in 2010, suggests that a strong, sustained east wind could indeed push water back in a specific shallow area. Carl Drews and Waking Han simulated the effects of a 63 mph wind blowing for 9 hours over a specific body of water, a lagoon in the northern Red Sea near the modern Suez Canal, or a site slightly further north, like the Lake of Tanis, also called Lake Manzala. They found that such a wind could indeed expose a land bridge, allowing people to cross. Once the wind stopped, the waters would rush back. This could account for the drowning of the Egyptian army. This wind set-down theory fits several biblical details: the strong east wind, the dry ground, and the waters returning. However, it requires a very specific geography, a shallow, U-shaped body of water, and an incredibly strong, sustained wind. And even then, it would be a very rare meteorological event. It also does not quite match the description of the walls of water on either side, which implies a deeper body of water. Another theory suggests a tsunami. An underwater earthquake could generate a tsunami, which initially pulls water away from the shore, a drawdown, exposing the seabed. If the Israelites crossed during this drawdown and the tsunami then returned, it could explain the disaster for the Egyptians. However, tsunamis are usually associated with earthquakes. No earthquake is mentioned in the Exodus narrative. And the strong east wind is central to the biblical account, not seismic activity. A third line of reasoning involves the location. The Bible refers to Yam Suf, often translated as Red Sea. But it can also mean Sea of Reeds. If the crossing happened at a much shallower reedy lake, such as the Lake of Tanis, then a strong wind would have a more pronounced effect. However, the Red Sea itself is deep, and the traditional route of the Exodus places the crossing further south into the actual Red Sea. The specific timing of the event happening precisely when needed, allowing the Israelites to cross but trapping the Egyptians, is the hardest part to explain naturally. It is the perfect instantaneous nature of the intervention that points to something beyond random natural phenomena. The biblical text presents it as a direct act of God. So was it a unique combination of natural forces perfectly timed and interpreted as divine? Or was it an event that fundamentally defies our understanding of the natural world? The parting of the Red Sea continues to inspire awe and argument, embodying the eternal tension between faith and scientific explanation. Could specific ancient geographies have had unique features that made such water phenomena more plausible? What are the limits of meteorological events, and how rare can a perfect storm of conditions be? How much does our modern materialistic worldview hinder our ability to comprehend ancient narratives of divine intervention? Number 1. Did a giant wooden ark survive a worldwide flood with every animal on board? The story of Noah's Ark, as mentioned before, is one of the most widely known and debated miracles. God commands Noah to build a massive ark, exactly 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. This is roughly 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet high. Noah, his family, and pairs of all land animals and birds enter the ark. A global flood then covers the earth for 150 days, drowning all other life. The ark floats, eventually landing on the mountains of Ararat. From a scientific standpoint, this story presents immense challenges. As discussed previously, there isn't enough water on Earth to cover all mountains. Geologists find no evidence of a global flood event in the time frame suggested. Biologists point out the impossibility of fitting 2 of every single animal species, let alone kinds, as some creationists argue, on one vessel. There are millions of species, each with unique habitat, food, and care requirements. The logistics are mind-boggling. However, the search for Noah's Ark has captured imaginations for centuries. Many expeditions have ventured to Mount Ararat in eastern Turkey, the traditional landing place. Over the years, numerous claims of finding the Ark have surfaced. One such claim was made by a team from NAMI Noah's Ark Ministries International in 2010. They claimed to have found wooden structures high on Mount Ararat. They said these structures contained different compartments, and carbon dating suggested the wood was 4,800 years old, roughly aligning with biblical timelines. They presented videos and photos of the alleged Ark remnants. However, this claim was widely discredited by mainstream archaeologists and scientists. Many argued the wood samples could have come from a much more recent human settlement or even be a hoax. The location and context of the find were also questioned. Dr. Randall Price, a biblical scholar, later admitted that members of the NAMI team had moved wood to the site, suggesting it was staged. Another famous search involved the Durupinar site, a boat-shaped formation discovered by Turkish Army Captain İlhan Durupinar in 1959. This site, located a few miles south of Mount Ararat, looks like the outline of a large ship. Ron Wyatt, an amateur archaeologist, heavily promoted this site in the 1980s and 90s, claiming it was Noah's Ark. He said radar scans and metal detectors showed a structured object underneath. However, geological studies of the Durupinar site, notably by geophysicist Salih Bayraktutan from Ataturk University, concluded it is a natural geological formation. It is a syncline, a type of geological fold formed by natural processes. The sheer scale of the ark and its contents, the global nature of the flood, and the absence of clear, unequivocal archaeological or geological evidence for such an event place this story firmly in the realm of the miraculous for scientific inquiry. if a global flood happened, it would have left unmistakable traces across the planet. We do not find them. So, is the story a myth, an allegory, or a deeply misunderstood account of an event that fundamentally reshaped our world? For believers, the flood is a test of faith. For scientists, it is a narrative that defies core principles of geology, biology, and physics. The enduring mystery of Noah's Ark forces us to confront the limits of literal interpretation and the power of ancient narratives. Could there be a forgotten understanding of global or world in ancient texts that differs from our modern geographical scope? How much of the natural world's history remains hidden from us, waiting to be discovered by new scientific methods? What universal human lessons are embedded in the tale of Noah's Ark, regardless of its literal truth? These 17 stories, ancient and captivating, push the boundaries of what we think we know. They challenge our scientific explanations, they spark wonder, and they make us ask again and again, what if there is more to the universe than our current understanding allows?